My predecessor told the NRA he's proud he did nothing on guns when he was president.
So that was Mike Johnson back during the State of the Union with his big ol' eye rolls. How could you say these accurate things about me? And it happened, and it seemed a little bit petty and a little bit juvenile. But immediately after the end of the State of the Union, I think most people moved on and were done with that. But one man was not done. And interestingly, it was Mike Johnson, because Mike Johnson, remember, is not just the speaker. He's the guy with the weird porn notification thing on his phone. He's a guy with some interesting views on things and personal accountability. And so apparently it bothered him that he had not only done the eye rolls, but that so many people had noticed it. It had become big memes. It was everywhere. And he, in a way that like, this feels so much like something that would have happened 20 years ago rather than now. He felt so bad that he apologized to Joe Biden about it. He was at a Friends of Ireland luncheon that he was there and Biden was there. And he apparently pulled Biden aside to apologize for the memes. The president, Joe Biden, laughed, then told the speaker he was glad Johnson was better behaved than Nancy Pelosi had been during Trump speeches, saying, "I'm just grateful you didn't rip my speech up, Jack." The speaker replied, "Well, Mr. President, didn't think my friends back home, or don't think my friends back home didn't want me to light it on fire. Our country is overrun with radicals." But anyway, so that came out. And like, if that's it, then I see that and I think, that's interesting. I don't even know that I think that he needed to eye roll. It was immature, but it's 2024. He apparently thought that crossed a line. And he apologized. And by the way, Mike Johnson and Biden have been able to work together on a few things. It almost feels like maybe some form of bipartisanship is still possible. Not necessarily bipartisanship that addresses like the biggest issues that we face, but like BS stuff on the periphery. And that said, the right is very, very, very mad that he apologized. And we'll turn to those reactions in just a second. Hey, I'm glad you're here. Listen, in order for the Damage Report to keep on going, we need viewers like you to become a member on YouTube. Can you click the join button on YouTube today? Thank you.
Well, it's phony, but it's appropriate. And here's what I mean. Listen, Mike Johnson is like a prisoner in solitary confinement. And maybe, I don't know, they keep all the curtains closed and maybe there's a tiny little sliver of sunlight that gets through for an hour or two a day. And so he knows there's a big world out there. And he's thinking the only way to survive these other, Marjorie Taylor Greene and these other little creepy crawlers is to attach myself to the Reagan Democrat, the old school Democrat, Jack Kemp, John McCain. And so I think he's thinking I have a long way to go. But if I just befriend this guy, okay, with the Ray-Bans, might be okay. I might be able to survive this and I might be able to reinvent myself. I really think that's what's going on here. And I think Biden even said, if you stick with me, kid, I'll help you do it. I don't know if he can or not, but I think this is what goes through my head.
Well, I don't know. Individually, I don't know if Biden can. And him publicly trying to help Johnson might hurt Johnson, actually. Like the fact that they sort of came together is what's hurting him. But I think that there is something to that theory, not for Biden to save him, but in the very near future, the Democrats might need to step up and save Mike Johnson because the crazies are circling and there's blood in the water. There's apology blood in the water. So here is Marjorie Greene, who posted this. Remember when Nancy Pelosi ripped up President Trump's speech? She did not apologize. Joe Biden is destroying America and Mike Johnson is apologizing for rolling his eyes. Again, okay, first of all, you dunce. They already covered the whole thing with Nancy Pelosi. You thought that this was some sort of like, hey, nobody probably remembers it. No, we all remember it. Like we here on the Damage Report, we criticized it. But anyway, they've already gone over that, okay? Because it's an incredibly minor thing. This is not the huge, massive thing that you're making it out to be. I know that you're looking for literally anything that makes Mike Johnson seem as crazy as you do on your best day, but this is like a nice thing. This is like he's a congressman from Louisiana. It's supposed to be that sort of like country friendly, polite sort of thing. You're the one who's forgotten about that, Marjorie Greene. He's being more authentic than you are in this case, but it's not just him. Steve Bannon says Johnson equals worm. And for a guy who kind of looks like a vaguely anthropomorphized sandworm from Dune, that is a biting remark. Tommy Lauren says, it is absolutely wild to me that House Republicans fought so hard to get rid of McCarthy, only to replace him with Bayou McCarthy with darker hair and glasses. I don't know what her issue is with the hair and glasses, and the idea that they're the exact same person seems a little bit ridiculous. And then you ladle on top of that, Tommy Lauren, I think that you forgot that you're supposed to be pretending that the Dems are the ones who hate country folk. You think the idea that a guy is like comes from a place with Bayou is embarrassing? It's worthy of mocking him for? There are plenty of his constituents that live in the Bayou country of Louisiana, and I don't think they like someone who lives on the coast mocking them so much, but whatever, I'll leave her to deal with that. Cat Turd will close things out, said, I'm starting to believe Mike Johnson is the Antichrist. And I don't doubt that that's true. Cat Turd is a moron. Why wouldn't he think that? So anyway, they're being very harsh in their criticism, Sharon. This is something that he did a long time ago. It's not like he could really avoid it now, but it is ridiculous that there's seemingly nothing he can do that doesn't lead to him getting attacked at this point. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. I think if he wakes up and has a latte in the morning, that's a problem. I think if he, excuses himself for a phone call with the missus, that's a problem. Everything he does is going to be a problem. And I don't know how much longer he's going to even be able to not just remain speaker, but perhaps even call himself a Republican, as long as MAGA's in charge. It is what it is. But the criticism is silly. I remember Nancy Pelosi, of course, ripping up the speech. I thought it was glorious, when she snatched it. Oh, that really was against the Presidential Records Act, don't you think? If you really go back to that. But what I loved most was what was that thing she did? Or am I doing it wrong?
Yeah,
I can't remember why or when she did it, but that to me was far more meme worthy than the torn up speech. I mean, the speech was garbage. Okay, we knew that.
Yeah. That's true. And look, I think in the moment I laughed at both of those. But the issue is like, for me, I want that sort of like purely performative thing from someone who does lots of stuff that is not purely performative. Yeah. Like if AOC ripped up the speech, I'd be like, oh, that's good, or whatever, insert a Bernie or something, insert whoever you have respect for. Whereas for Nancy Pelosi, it's like, yeah, no, I know that you're good at this symbolic stuff. Yeah. I know that, but like, could you be awesome on like climate change or something? But that said, I agree. Members make a difference here at TYT. You help make the show happen, and we see you in the chat with your loyalty badge. Click the join button to become a member today.
Trump egging on protesters to go to the New York courthouse where his hush money trial is taking place.
Outside. For great Americans, people that want to come down and they want to protest at the court and they want to protest peacefully. We have more police presence here than anyone's ever seen. For blocks, you can't get near this courthouse.
Well, Trump also falsely claimed that, quote, thousands of his supporters were, quote, turned away from court today. The reality of it is this. The fact is his supporters are allowed outside the courthouse. Just the facts are so far in this trial, not many have showed up. Out front now, George Conway. He watched Trump's trial today from inside the courtroom. He's been inside many days so far. And he's joining me also to talk about his nearly $1 million donation to President Biden. He's about to headline a major fundraiser for the first time for the president tomorrow. And talking about this, here, George, publicly, on TV for the first time. I just want to start with where you spent your day, and you spent other days.
Yeah,
and that's
there
in this
was
courtroom.
no cordon keeping people away from
No,
that courthouse.
well, not that I saw when I was there yesterday.
It's like, I think his problem is that people aren't, his supporters aren't willing to pay the subway fare to go down there.
All right, so you've been watching him closely for years, and now you're there. I mean, feet away from him. You're in the criminal trial, so you're in the room. You're watching. Yeah. Every single thing said, his response, how it's handled. What moment struck you the most today?
It struck me, first of all, the two moments that struck me were one, when the judge basically challenged Trump's lawyer on the gag order and basically said, you're losing all credibility. And he was Todd Blanchard was making these arguments that just were not even close to being anything that was in the zone of convincing or credible. Arguing essentially that retweets don't count, even though, Trump boasts that when he puts something on Truth Social, it amplifies it and everybody learns about it. Right. And then the fact that he actually modified what the Fox anchor said about juror number 2.
Oh, right.
And the fact that I mean, it was just the fact that he was arguing that retweets don't count. The fact that he was arguing that
because he would retweet in quotes when someone says something pejorative
and the
about
other
a
argument
witness.
was that somehow there was an exception to the gag order if somebody made a political attack on him, even if it was a witness and this stuff. And first of all, there's no exception for that in the gag order. You just can't attack witnesses. And the witnesses have the right to say whatever they want because they're witnesses. They're not the criminal defendant. And also, it was that the witnesses there wasn't anything he was actually responding to. The Blanche couldn't point to what it was that Trump was responding to.
Right,
and
said political motivated attacks and couldn't list one.
Right, and he couldn't list
Yeah.
one. And at points Marchand was saying, okay, but the timing of what you're saying doesn't make any sense. And it just went downhill from there. And I almost felt bad for Todd Blanche, but that's what happens when you represent a guy who's just going out there. Oh, and my favorite moment there, and that part of it was Blanche said, my client is trying very, very hard to comply with the order. And that just set you could just see the judge looking at Blanche like, oh, come on.
You gotta be kidding
You
me.
gotta be kidding me. You know, he's looking for ways around it.
So we get that ruling any moment. It could come any moment.
Yeah.
And I know, it'll probably be a fine at this point, but obviously could end up with prison time if he keeps doing it. I mean, it's a serious thing.
Yeah, I think it should be a fine. But then I think there has to be a warning. Like, okay, I'm gonna put you in for an hour or 2 hours. You keep doing this.
And then it goes.
Yeah.
All right, so look, George, you're obviously a very well-known conservative lawyer, and you've made your career and your reputation on that, right, for decades. Okay. And then, you had a moment you became a Trump critic.
Yeah.
And you did so at great personal cost. This has had great cost in your family and your personal life. You have done it because you believe in it deeply.
Right.
And now you are giving Biden the maximum amount that somebody can give Joe Biden, $929,600 that you have earned over your life to a person running for president. So how in the world did you get there?
Yeah, no, that's just an amazing story to me. If you told me that I would do something like that and support a Democrat, and tomorrow night I'm going to be headlining a fundraiser in Washington, asking Democrats to give to a Democrat, I would have said, well, that's just pure fantasy. That would never happen. But the evolution was just watching how the Republican Party has become something that's completely unrecognizable. It's become a personality. It's become essentially, one of the things that sort of attracted people to the Republican Party in the 60s, 70s, and 80s was a feeling that the left had become anti-American. And right now, the people who are anti-American are the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world and the people in the House of Representatives who are basically voting and trying to block aid to American allies because they want to help Donald Trump create an issue for the campaign on border. It doesn't even make any sense. And it's just, this man, 4 years ago, I voted in my 10th presidential election. And I, for the first time, cast the vote for the Democrat. And
First time
in 10, first time out of 10. And I did that because I felt that Donald Trump was a threat to the country, a threat to democracy. He doesn't care a whit about the country. He doesn't care a whit about the Constitution, about the rule of law. And he wants to undermine the country and its rule of law for his own political purposes. And that was before January 6th. That was before he actually tried.
But George, what I'm also curious about, and I guess I put the emphasis on $929,600. Most people can't imagine giving $929 to a person running for office, right? It's just an ugly thing. They don't want to. So you're doing this, and you've been working your life as a lawyer. You've got children. You're choosing to do this, and I know it didn't come. There was a moment, right, where what happened? You're driving your car.
I'm driving my car, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going to ask these people to give money. I hate asking people to give money. I don't even like asking people to give me money that they actually owe me, and I'm trying to think, well, I need to, I want to set an example. And I thought about what the law, I've only given once to a Democrat, but that was only for a lunch for somebody who was being honored, a law partner of mine. And I gave $30,000 to the Trump Victory Fund in 2016, but my wife was running the campaign, and it was a reasonable amount then.
Okay.
And I thought, well, why am I doing this? And I thought, it's like, this is for all the marbles. This man, after what we saw on January 6th, what we saw afterwards, and what we see him now saying, he basically wants to turn the government into a vehicle for retribution against his political enemies. He wants to turn the country into a banana republic, which he tried to do 4 years ago. And I thought, there's nothing more important than this. And yeah, it's going to come out of my kids' inheritance, but the most important thing they can inherit is living in a constitutional democracy. And that was the moment where I said, I have to do everything I can. I'm going to give the maximum, and I'm not going to regret it. I'll regret not doing it.
And I know you're emotional now.
Yeah.
How did your children react?
Yeah, well, my oldest daughter said, well, why don't you write me a check for that amount? I said, you'll get it. You'll get something someday. You'll end up spending it in one place anyway.
But they understood. They understood that you did this.
Well,
I
don't know that the eldest one who I had the conversation with quite understood, but I hope someday she will.
All right. Well, George, thank you for sharing this.
Yeah.
And for talking about it. And I know you will be headlining that fundraiser tomorrow in Washington, which is obviously going to be a significant moment for you, and a hard one in some ways and an easy one in others.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
He simply cannot stop, or maybe it's just a strategy. Donald Trump will not relent in how he breaks a gag order imposed on him by the judge overseeing his Manhattan hush money trial just last night, as the judge weighs whether or how to punish the former president for 10 instances. The prosecution claims he flaunted restrictions on what he can say. Trump seems to have just ignored the rules again. Here's what he said about a witness, Michael Cohen, in an interview with CNN affiliate WPVI.
Michael Cohen is a convicted liar, and he's got no credibility whatsoever. He was a lawyer, and you rely on your lawyers.
Joining me now, CNN legal analyst Carrie Cardero and CNN correspondent Kara Scannell, who has been CNN's eyes and ears and then some inside the courtroom covering this trial. Kara, I do want to start with you on this gag order. What is the expectation? What are you hearing from your sources in the court? Any sense of, we don't know how it's going to come down, but even the when?
Well, we're waiting for the judge to issue this decision. Yesterday, after the hearing, he said he would reserve decision on this. But it came after what was at times contentious hearing, with the judge becoming frustrated with Donald Trump's legal team not responding to his questions, as he put it, because prosecutors have said that Trump has violated this gag order at least 10 times. They have the interview that you just played a clip of, Trump actually gave yesterday morning on his way to court before this hearing took place, but it echoes some of the other statements that prosecutors have said are problematic. So the judge was pressing Trump's attorneys in court about what was he responding to? Because their argument has been that Trump is a candidate. He should be able to respond to political attacks. They were saying statements from Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels were political. And the judge just kept pressing, saying, what was political about this? What is he responding to here? Mm-hmm. And at one point, one of the other arguments that they made is that Trump's lawyers said that he was just reposting what other people were posting. But the judge was challenging that too. And at one point, he grew frustrated, saying, Trump's lawyers trying to argue again, but Your Honor. And then the judge saying, I was not done. You're not giving me anything to hang my hat on to say, yeah, you're right, the repost, that was ambiguous. So judge just becoming frustrated and saying that Trump's attorney was losing credibility because he was not able to answer the judge's questions.
And Carrie, the court is not in session today on this particular case. But we are now in the middle of the David Pecker testimony. We heard it most of the day, not all day yesterday. We expect it to resume tomorrow. The court is releasing the actual transcripts. And part of what I want to read from the testimony that they released last night is David Pecker talking about Trump's involvement specifically And he said, I would describe Mr. Trump as very knowledgeable. I would describe him as very detail oriented. I would describe him as almost as a micromanager from what I saw, that he looked at all aspects of whatever the issue was. From a lawyer's perspective, why is that such important testimony?
Well, it's important because one of the main things that the prosecutors have to prove in this case is that the former president was knowledgeable about the fraud that is alleged to have taken place. And so this general characterization of the former president as being a micromanager, being involved in the details of things, sort of goes along that path of him having knowledge of the fraud that the prosecutors say takes place. But the other aspect of Mr. Pecker's testimony is that it is not illegal to do sleazy things to influence an election in the way of trying to win it. And I think the big challenge for the prosecutors in this case is distinguishing between the fraud and the actual way to affect the election in an illegal way that is different than just sort of unsavory conduct.
Yeah, the prosecution is clearly with Pecker trying to lay the groundwork of Donald Trump being somebody who would never allow for alleged fraudulent documents to be, to go forward without him knowing about it. And
right.
So that's clearly part of this.
CNN legal analyst and criminal defense attorney Joey Jackson joins us now. Joey, how do you anticipate Judge Merchan is going to rule on whether Trump violated this gag order?
Yeah, Boris, good to be with you. And Brianna, the way that I see it is that these are violations. And so the question to me is not whether or not any of the several posts, 10 and counting, of course, with the one we just showed, yes, that was said before and aired after. There's no question to me that they were violations. The critical inquiry is what specifically the judge is going to do. The trial is just underway, and we're at the stage where the judge, Boris, has to set the tone and tenor for the proceeding. And just make no mistake about it, it's not only about the tone and tenor of the proceeding. It's not only about the integrity of our process. It's not only about following rules, right? But the issue is whether or not someone could be harmed. Yes, there's witness intimidation, but there's also people who have pretty strongly held views and are on various sides as we look there at what the judge can do in terms of imposing $1,000 or giving Mr. Trump incarceration. But the reality is something's got to give. And so what I think the judge is struggling with is what is the appropriate remedy at this point to stop this from happening. If it's happening now, you better believe it's going to be likely that it continues to happen. The judge has to stop it in its tracks.
Yeah, let's put back up that graphic where it said the possible penalties for contempt here, because you can see it says $1,000 or up to 30 days. I think we all know which one would be more convincing to former President Trump when it comes to getting him to stay within the lines here. And to that point, Joey, CNN's John Miller has reported that the Secret Service, court officers, and NYC Corrections have been quietly discussing what happens if Trump ends up being jailed for contempt. If he continues to violate the gag order, do you see any scenario where that would actually happen?
I really do. And I do because let's talk about a few things. Number one, if we accept the proposition that no one is above the law, the options we looked at just there, right? There's the admonishment, but we also looked at the monetary $1,000 punishment. Guess what? Wasn't there just a civil proceeding wherein there's a $500 million judgment or so against the former president? Has that prevented him from doing anything? Hasn't there been an E. Jean Carroll defamation case? Two, right? I mean, one relating to allegations of sexual assault, wherein there's up to $90 million. What has that done? And so it gets us, Brianna, to your question of the other option, which is jail. Now, potentially, you have a maximum of 30 days under the law. Does that mean he puts him in? That is the judge at some point for a few hours. Does he put him in overnight? But it has to be a real possibility. And obviously, the Secret Service and interested parties have to do it in a way where they're ready for such a contingency. Now, there may be other ramifications to that, I think, that have to weigh on the judge, not only of this proceeding, but, how might there be a public reaction, right? We can say that, hey, the judge shouldn't be considering that. But, I just think people are so entrenched in their views that the judge has to consider everything in terms of safety. And incarceration, though, to get the former president, to do what he's supposed to do and what everyone else really kind of does all the time, which is to follow judicial orders. And if not, they're in contempt, I think has to be on the table.
Joey, I want to present a contrasting view of things. We spoke to someone you frequently share our air with, Michael Moore, a criminal defense attorney in Georgia, yesterday, and he argued that he believes Trump is doing this deliberately to take the focus off the actual content of the case and to make the focus about his rhetoric and his ongoing fights with Michael Cohen, et cetera. I'm curious what you think of that, if you think this is a deliberate attempt from Trump to distract, and if so, whether that might influence the judge to handle it differently.
Yeah, I think Michael Moore may be onto something, and that may be very well the case. Now, it's very difficult, Boris, Brianna, for us to know. We're not competent to know what someone else is thinking. We can only discern what they're thinking based on inferences, but whether it's politics, whether it's to take the steam off of it, that's the reality. There's an order. You need to follow it. There are consequences. If you don't, what that consequence is, we're going to find out when the judge issues the decision.
Joey Jackson, always great to get your perspective. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Boris.
A major new filing in one of the other criminal cases Donald Trump is facing, this one related to the federal classified documents investigation. And it includes notes from an FBI interview with a key witness, described as someone who worked in Trump's White House. One of the most shocking details, this witness, identified as person 16, says Trump's personal aide and co-defendant in the case, Walt Nauta, was told he would be pardoned if Trump won a second term. Now, a reminder, Nauta was charged last June with lying to the FBI and obstructing special counsel Jack Smith's investigation. Here's what the filing specifically says. Quote, Nauta was told by POTUS about people that his investigation was not going anywhere, that it was politically motivated and much ado about nothing. Nauta was also told that even if he gets charged with lying to the FBI, POTUS will pardon him in 2024. And that's not all. In one of the more bizarre details of the filing, this witness gave Trump a stark warning to hand over the documents to the National Archives. The filing says that in November of 2021, person 16 told the former president of the United States, whatever you have, give everything back. Let them come here and get everything. Don't give them a noble reason to indict you, because they will. Former POTUS provided a weird, you're the man type of response. It goes on to say that person 16 was given the impression that Trump was going to return the records, but the meeting was interrupted when a Mar-a-Lago club member and a much younger woman walked up to take a photo with Trump. I want to bring in CNN Senior Law Enforcement and former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. So glad to have you on this evening. So listen, in addition to warning Trump face-to-face, this person 16 also says that they also asked Trump's children to convince him to give up the boxes, saying, quote, talk to your dad about giving them back. It's not worth the aggravation. Is this a value add to this case?
Well, certainly it's an interesting episode, and it could kind of go in a bunch of different directions. I think first, this witness, witness referred to as person 16, is somebody who clearly has frequent access or had frequent access to the former president, was a member of the administration, but also traveled to Mar-a-Lago on numerous occasions after Trump was no longer president. He's also, from these statements, somebody who was very, very clearly worried about the legal implications of the retention of these documents and tried to pass along suggestions about how to resolve this through the children and you know, in different ways. So all of that to me suggests, Laura, that this person is probably somebody with legal knowledge, probably a lawyer, somebody who served in a counsel position in the White House, but we don't know that for sure. The interesting thing about the Nauta reporting is we really don't know how person 16 heard about this alleged offer of a pardon in return for lying to the FBI. Did he learn that directly from Walt Nauta, or did he learn that from someone else who claimed to have heard it from Nauta, or maybe someone else who actually made those comments to Nauta? So that's the piece of the puzzle that we don't have. So it's hard to assess the impact that this witness would have without understanding that fact.
You know, this person apparently asked the FBI not to record their conversation, quote, saying having the interview recorded was a far bigger risk for him in the Trump world. So how do you think the FBI interpreted that statement?
Well, it's interesting. I know that they tried to convince him that not recording the interview would actually look worse for him because everybody else, all other witnesses' interviews were recorded. And of course, the person made that comment and said that he still didn't want to do it. Anyway, the question that I would have had as an investigator interviewing this witness was, boy, how likely is this person ever to actually testify in front of a grand jury or in front of a trial jury if they're not even willing to be recorded here in a private interview? So I think it does indicate, they should have some concerns about whether or not this person, even though he did speak to them, and let's give him the benefit of the doubt that he spoke truthfully, he may not be willing to go all the way and testify in a proceeding.
But it would have had to have been under oath talking to them in the first place, right?
Well, you don't always put every witness under oath during the course of a routine FBI interview. However, you let witnesses know that if they lie to the agents during the course of the interview, that can be charged as a federal crime. It's via 18 USC 1001 is making a false statement to an investigator in the course of investigation can lead to a federal charge. So it's essentially, you let them know that there's a significant penalty that could be on their way if they make false statements. The thing that really blows my mind, though, about this whole episode, Laura, is if this actually happened, if some sort of an offer of a pardon was made to Walt Nauta in return for lying to the FBI in his own interview, which we know he did because we've read his transcript now, right? That came out about a week ago. We know that he lied to the interviewers in that interaction. That's something that could be charged as obstruction of justice. That's kind of the worst outcome. But even beyond that,